Again, thank you everyone for coming. This is great to talk and learn about our history. So just for those of you, the few of you that don't know Dr. Tshaka, Dr. Oba Tshaka is a warrior scholar, renowned public speaker, professor, author, leader, organizer, visionary of exceptional influence who addresses audiences in the United States, Britain, France, Rotterdam, and Africa. For 38 years, Professor Tshaka, Dr. Oba Tshaka was a professor at San Francisco State University, where he's now professor emeritus. Dr. Nathan Hare says Oba Tshaka is one of the key social philosophers in the African American race today. The late Dr. Asa Hilliard, a great educator and scholar, said of Dr. Oba Tshaka, he is one of the most powerful, deep thinkers in the world today. And then he continued and he says, he has been totally consistent as an uncompromising truth seeker, visionary, organizer, leader in the African liberation in the United States and the African continent. He has published newspapers, he's led organizations, he has been and is a courageous activist. Dr. Oba Tshaka is an organic scholar whose scholarship emerged out of the Black liberation movement. In the course of organizing, Tshaka, then Bill Bradley, underwent an awakening that led him to realize that his mind was under remote control. This led him to undergo a process of re-education under masters, a process that continues to this day. This lifelong process of re-education would transform Tshaka into a scholar warrior. The lessons learned through study would guide his organizing, and the lessons learned from battles for Black liberation would shape his studies and writings. There's a lot of things that are in this introduction. I hope that I've covered a number of them. And I want to just play this song here. You know, we like to play songs here at Black Knowledge Matters. We are a musical people. And the first one, let me share my screen with you. First one is This Little Light of Mine.
I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, this little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine. Yes. Let it shine. Hallelujah. Let it shine. Let it shine. For you and me, yeah. Let it shine. For you and me. Hallelujah. I'm gonna let it shine. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Yes. For you and me, Lord. I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, let it shine for you and me. I'm gonna let it shine. Yes. Let it shine. Hallelujah. Let it shine. Let it shine for you and me. You know. Let it shine for you and me. Hallelujah. I'm gonna let it shine. I'm gonna let it shine for you and me.
And now, without any further ado, let's bring forward the man himself, Dr. Oba Tashaka. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you, Brother Imhotep. I'm really proud of Imhotep. You know, when I first started teaching at San Francisco State, I was in the midst of organizing Pan-African People's Organization. It had been after 6 years of battles in the San Francisco Freedom Movement, which was a 10,000 person movement that lasted for 6 years. 3 of those I led it. And we defeated the entire economic power structure of San Francisco, the Bay Area, and much of the state of California for jobs for Blacks and people of color. And we organized 45,000 Black people block by block. We gave birth to the free speech movement at UC Berkeley and inspired the experimental college that was a forerunner of Black studies at San Francisco State, where I would end up teaching. And we built a 220 unit set of housing called the Marcus Garvey Martin Luther King housing that's in San Francisco. You get a 1,400 square foot unit for $170.
Wow.
That is the only successful Black power, Black freedom movement in the North between 63 and now. And most people don't even know about it. And if you're in the Bay Area, state of California, you got a job, it came through that movement, and none of us profited from it. None of us took a dime for that movement, and we did a lot more. So that shaped me. I'm a spirit scholar warrior, and organic. I come out of the ground. Once I realized I was brainwashed, then I began to discard not only the knowledge, but the system. And that system is one we still embrace. That's what my book on Seba, To Know the Truth is to Be the Truth. It's 2 volumes. 1 volume is on the mastery system for education, and the other one is on the mastery system for masters. In other words, people who want to be the best. And I've taken 6 masters, including Theophilo Benga, Ella Baker, John Coltrane, and a number of others as examples of this path of mastery. And we are today in a position where we think, because we know African-centered stuff, we're fully African-centered, but we've often been trained in their system. And so you may have the information, but if you have their system, then you're in a trap and you end up in the same place. And that's why the European scholars say they don't feel threatened by some of the African-centered scholars because they trained them. And most of the African-centered scholars don't know what that means. So the program that I did for WOZE last Sunday on the 43rd anniversary was addressing that key problem, which is the problem of despiritualization, a subject that we don't generally deal with. And the title for that was Saving the Planet from the Savage Civilization of Despiritualization to the Civilization of the Light. So most of us, when we get educated, and the more we're educated, the more we end up being miseducated, even when we have the right information. And that's only recent since Black studies. We have their methodology. And their methodology is a despiritualized methodology. And so we get a lot of facts and we stack them in our heads and we can feed them back. And we think that's Afrocentric. That's part of it. The facts are important. Sometimes the facts aren't even truthful because they've been despiritualized. They've been sanitized. Anything that's got to do with the spirit, in some cases, it's been taken out. Some of our own scholars do it. Not all of them, but some of them. So that was what I was discussing last week. My topic for this evening is a follow-through. I told Imhotep I'd like to do a follow-through so that you can link these two together. This is just an overview. And so the topic for this evening is the Sodaya, or innovative light to the just society. The Sodaya, Sodayyi, or innovative light to the just society. Sodaya is the fourth degree of knowledge in the Dogon system that pretty much describes the heights that any of the masters aspire to in any African civilization. And African Americans, we have a way of taking people to this in our system. Almost all our masters have gone through this. And so I want to say to Woze, this is a pleasure to do this, and for the viewers of the Dr. Obert Shaka show that I do every Saturday at 10 in the morning, West Coast Pacific time, and you can see it at any time you want to, because it's posted. We've done 170 shows in 3 years. I've been doing this to reach out to the younger generation, and we've drawn in a lot of younger people. And so this is also for viewers of my show. When you see this show, hit the red light and subscribe. And for those of you who haven't seen the show, go to it, check it out, hit the red light and subscribe. And I also want to say that there's backup material for what I'm dealing with tonight on the show. There's a series on the Twa that's key to this discussion. These are the world's first people, and they're the people that founded Kemet 10,000 BC, that most of our historians do not study. That's my specialty. I go into what the other scholars don't deal with, because why should I cover what they've covered? They've done a good job. Plus, I'm a revolutionary. I'm the only one of the major scholars that's a revolutionary. And I don't know if you know what that means. For me, it means they've tried to take me out 3 times. For me, it means they've tried to take my plate, the food that feeds you. But I've never lost a battle, and I don't complain. You're not going to hear me up here, woe is me, they came after me. I came after you, and I've never lost a battle. The first thing I am is a spirit man and a warrior, and I love a fight if the cause is just and I can win. I don't fight anything I can't lose. As I pointed out to Woze, I have 3 W's as rules: win, win, and win. Losing is for me a crime. I'm a martial artist, and I know there are battles that I couldn't win. I would get out of them. And we're taught to avoid a fight. And the real art of war is to win a fight without fighting. And the majority of my battles have been won without a fight. I'm a strategist before I'm anything. I thank God for giving me that gift. That's the art of power. And so I pretty well know how to take an opponent out before I engage him. When I hit the battlefield, you've already lost, because I have a strategy. And I've only had one time where I didn't have the strategy, and then I pulled together the smartest people I had, because I surround myself with smart people. You hear me? No dummies. And we figured it out. And that was when we took on the biggest bank in the world, the Bank of America, who we defeated. And they described that battle as David against Goliath. We were David. And after we won that battle, a preacher called me in, a Methodist preacher. He wanted to hire me, and I'm not for hire. I don't take any money for anything I do in the movement, and you're not going to be able to hire me. But he said he wanted me to come in, want to talk to me. And he said, when you all took on the Bank of America, that was David going up against Goliath. And all you all had was a slingshot. Well, what he meant by that was a strategy. He didn't know what it was we had. And the Bank of America to this day doesn't know how we whipped them. And once we whipped them, it took 6 months, biggest bank in the world. You hear me? Then I get a call from Wells Fargo, and they said, if you could beat the biggest bank in the world, and remember, at this time, all banks were located in one state. So when you whip that bank, that's it. You know what I mean? They said, if you could whip the biggest bank in the world, you could whip us. We're hiring. That's called winning a battle without a fight, in this case by intimidation. Now, that's not really the highest form of strategy. when you scare somebody, the highest form of strategy, it's an art. Next to God, love, and the truth, strategy is the ultimate art, and it's an art of beauty. And only masters can really see the ultimate art when it's executed. You hear me? And so this has been my great joy in life. And now that I'm 84, I've taken on the role of training people in this art and working with the younger people who are doing good work. Groups like Black Lives Matter that put Trump out of the White House and is preparing him for the jailhouse. You hear me? So this is me, you know what I mean? And so when I entered San Francisco State, I thought I was naive enough to think I could revolutionize everybody. I later found out that didn't happen. But then I was pleased to find people like Brother Imhotep, and there are some others who decided to dedicate themselves to the liberation of African people in their way, because I never thought they would do it my way. Never wanted them to reproduce me. So it's real pride and joy to see this brother who's a spirit man and a good brother. And that's what I like most. Brother Makalizi, brother who I love, good brother, humble brother. That's what I love most. Character, good character. And that is the nature of our history and our people. So last week's presentation was stressing the importance of placing the higher mind in charge of the lower mind. And the lower mind was the mind of reason. So that was last week's. And I went through tracing how the Greeks had began to create this process of despiritualization, of taking spirit out of everything and reducing everything to a material level. And when it comes to reason, a despiritualized level where intuition is taken out, where God is taken out, where all you have is facts. And then it depends on who arranges the facts, what you really have. So last week, I was showing basically how this process of taking the spirit out of everything then enabled the European to then move to control Mother Nature and to control humanity. See, all we usually do is confine a discussion of European to racism. That's lazy. That's obvious. Yeah, they're racist. Yeah. Now let's talk about something else. Like, what's their worldview? Guess what? They had one before they ever came in contact with us. And it's that worldview that is devastating. Despiritualization is just one part of it. The book that I'm finishing, Seva, To Know the Truth is to Be the Truth, I've finished 670 pages.
When is that coming out? When is that?
It'll come out this coming year, 2024, because I'm doing a show and other things. And plus, I take my time. I want to make sure it's right. This is a 25-year project. I've been writing this book 25 years. This is a replacement system for their miseducation system. You hear me? I'm a revolutionary, so I do systems. I never planned it. That's the way it is. If you're a revolutionary, what you're trying to do is put something just in place of what's unjust. Put something straight in place of something that's crooked. Put something right in place of something that's wrong. So I'm a systems person. So I got a system for freeing your mind. When Imhotep was talking about I underwent an awakening, I tracked my awakening. And then with a brother named Bulunlelu Wabogo, he and I laid out what I call the 6-fold stages to mental freedom. And we're going to be doing a show, a year-long show on YouTube for the 6-fold stages of mental freedom, twice a month, a couple hours each time, with people who are members of Pan-African People's Organization, some of you whom you know, Ustadi, Fanya, and others who have gone through this process. This is the ultimate healing system. Malcolm X went through this, Amilcar Cabral went through this, and many of our leaders that goofed up in the 60s, they may have had part of this, but they weren't systematic. You see the guy behind me in sunglasses there? That's Amilcar Cabral. He went through it, the best leader in the 20th century. Cape Verde, Guinea-Bissau. A lot of you may have heard of him, and a lot of you may not have. Better than Malcolm, better than Ho Chi Minh, better than Mao Zedong. He was the best of the best, and I still draw from him. And on my show, I interviewed his wife, who was on earlier this year, on his contribution and hers, because the women warriors played a role in the armed struggle in Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde. So last week was focusing on despiritualization, which is a key part of the European project. Now, there are many dimensions to the European worldview. I cover them in my next book. And while it is a major reason why the planet is in trouble, because if you regard the planet as inanimate, as just material, then you separate yourself from it, and then you figure you can do anything you want to it. And then if you're ruled by the lower mind of reason, which is also the mind of greed, reason's a good thing, don't get me wrong. But when reason is left free, devoid of the higher mind, which is the intuition, which is God, then it does whatever it wants to do. I was just reading the biography of Henry Kissinger, who basically played a big part in the murders carried out in Vietnam, in Cambodia, in the overthrow of Salvador Allende in Chile, and in many other crimes against humanity. This was a very smart German Jew who came to the United States, got educated at Harvard, and who had no sense of conscience. When one of his advisors warned him of the genocide that was going to be carried out by the Indonesians against the neighboring island state, he screamed at him, cussed him out, and fired him, because he didn't care about the deaths of people. He was serving the interests of power, and that's what despiritualized reason can do. It can be greedy, it can be bloody, and it certainly is going to be dishonest. As Native Americans said, white man speaks with forked tongue. Say one thing, do another. That's the society you're living under. So, and right now you see it with Biden and the death that's visiting the Palestinian people. Biden is saying, let Israel do this because they were attacked. But he's not saying why they were attacked. They're not saying that these are people, the Palestinians, who face domestic colonialism. That is, the Jewish people came in, the Zionists, they took their country and removed them from their country by and large. Usually, when you have a settler colony, that leads to genocide, because the people that want your land are going to wipe you out. America is a settler colony. They genocided 90% of the Native Americans. Genocided a part of our people in Africa, the Herero people in South Africa, they were genocided. And then we lost millions of people through slavery. That's genocide. And the Middle Passage. And now, through hunger, through oppression of various forms. So, when we're looking at the system of despiritualization, which has caused problems, we know that's combined with racism. And in the case of, the people in Israel, that's a form of racism. The Zionists regard them as animals. And in fact, they call oppressing them mowing the lawn. They periodically go out and bomb them, kill them, steal their land. You know what I mean? And that's because of that mentality. It's a despiritualized mind combined with racism. But then there's another one. See, there's a lot more than this. I'm only hitting the top because I want to get into my main topic. But in order to get into it, I've got to explain this one. Because if part of the project of despiritualization was a project of control, control of Mother Nature, control of humanity, particularly people of color, but whites have their own hierarchy of control. There are those on the top, those on the bottom, and that includes in their own societies. So there's another thing that explains why the world is facing oppression, and also why the planet is in danger, why we have this system of global warming, why we had colonialism and slavery, and now economic colonialism called neo-colonialism. And this has to do with Aryanism. Aryanism. I owe the beginning of this study to one of my masters, Dr. Jacob Carruthers, who started me on this project. Jake is one of the people I apprenticed under, a great scholar, great human being. And he was the first one that I heard really put this in a proper perspective, and then I began to do my own research. So a major reason why we faced oppression globally, people of color and other people as well, is this history and philosophy of Aryanism. Aryan, the word Aryan, A-R-Y-A-N, it has two components, Aryan, Arius. Aryans are defined as lords and masters. And that's the root of all Europeans. They come from Aryan stock. Lord and masters, Aryan. Arius are the Aryans, the masters, or the people. And so Aryan, lord and master, they were warriors, nomadic warriors. And they used their own people to carry out war in various parts of the world. Their origin begins around 4000 BC in Ukraine, the Caucasus Mountains, in that area of the world. And so what ends up happening is they are warlike people and whatnot, but they have the idea that it is their mission in life to be lords and masters of everyone else. First, lords and masters of their own people. So those who are in control are the Aryans, the lords and masters. Their people are described by them as no good for nothing, dirty scum, in case you think that they think highly of their own people. You should understand why, whatever system they create, their masses tend to be abused and oppressed. And if they have any time where they do good for any period of time, it's a short time. Like in Europe after World War II, they picked up Roosevelt's New Deal. And so they started to give out healthcare, unemployment, retirement, these kinds of things, carrying it further than Roosevelt did. And now they're trying in this country to tear down everything that's left of that New Deal, the last of which is Social Security. And if Trump gets the White House, the Senate, and the House, it will be gone. And those of you that think they can't because it's yours, well, this is our life. And look where we are. They did it because they could, and they'll do it again if they get the chance.
Yes.
So we have to understand that Aryanism is a component of this process of oppression. Now, the subject for today, the Sodaya or innovative light, to define the just society. I'm putting this forward because as a historian, I try to make the past serve the present. So it's not just about studying the past, but how can you apply it to transform your present? And so my systems are good for right now and for the future. And so the subject for this evening, the Sodaya or innovative light to define the just society, the purpose of this discussion is to really look at where does the highest level of creativity come from? How's it developed? And then how can it be used? And I'm not describing something that I've invented, though I've experienced it. I'm describing a process that is key if you want to be free. And it doesn't mean that the people who have used it, because this process of the Sodaya or the innovative light, it's true for all people. And among a certain category of people in every group, there are what you call the Sodaya people. These are innovators. These are the people that represent 2% in a field. These are the people that create new fields of thought in whatever area it is. And so the purpose of this is to give the markers for this Sodaya. And I come from experience. My innovations come from two levels. One is practical stuff, day-to-day stuff that worked. And then the other is from the light. And those come from God. And a lot of people will question that, because if you're a good trained Christian or Muslim or into Judaism, they'll tell you, you can't see God, blah, blah. Really? Well, we'll see. You understand? Really? So this is the real purpose of this discussion, is to really get into what is this higher realm of creativity, and how is this higher realm accessed? This comes from experience, but I'll also use texts from Medu Neter and from the Dogon system. And if I had time, I would use it from the Yoruba system. I'm into Ifa. My priest is an Araba, who is the second highest priest in the Yoruba system. And that system is one where the priest is called Father of Mysteries. And I've had this priest for nearly 50 years. He's a diviner and can tell you things about your future. He's never been wrong. And by the way, our leaders on the plantation during enslavement were virtually all diviners. Or if they were rebellious leaders like Nat Turner, they had spirit power and they had spirit guides. No rebellion among our people that's been successful has been successful without two elements: spirit, and then down to earth ammunition of whatever kind it is. Praise the Lord and pass the ammunition. Huh? But God's got to be in the picture. If God ain't in the picture, most of us aren't going to be around. As Julian Richardson of Marcus Bookstore said, if you can't get Black people to do two things, tap their feet and think, they ain't going to join the movement. And that's why the despiritualized intellectual movements haven't been able to gain ground with our people, in this case, Marxism. And I'm not opposed to Marxism. Any system that wants to distribute the goodies so that the people can have it, that's better than the ones that want to have everything. But I know that they got problems because they're also coming from this Aryan worldview. So I respect their system. I don't down their system in the sense that I'm lining up to support this system, but I'm not in their system either. Because if we've had 149,000 years of history where most of that time we lived a good life, shouldn't you study that system? Shouldn't you draw from that system to update it? That's what John Henry Clark often said. I'm not following him. I apprenticed under him too for about 25 years. I loved the brother, beautiful brother, you know, but I'm not copying him. It just makes sense. You know, if you got something in your own backyard, why are you going to somebody else's? And it's a poor frog that won't praise its own pond. And I like this African pond. And by the way, I'm a spiritual blues man. That song you heard, This Little Light of Mine, we sang that in jail in the freedom movement. We sang that when we were demonstrating. Singing and swinging go together for Black people, even though Malcolm said it didn't. Muhammad Ali would say, I'm going to take you to heaven in 7. You know what I mean? Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. Muhammad Ali. You understand? That's singing and swinging at the same time. Black folks do their best when they got some music behind it. You know what I'm talking about? So when we're looking then at this despiritualization, now, we're talking about how we get to the spirit part, to the light part. And so when we're looking at innovation today, then it's an innovation that comes from the light. That's why I wanted that song to open, This Little Light of Mine. We come from the civilization of the light. And when our people were drawn into this middle passage and forced into enslavement, they came in here with the civilization of the light. So I pointed out last Sunday, we're talking about they took our culture in slavery. Culture is a way of life and designed for living. And as long as you live, you'll have it. It'll undergo change. It underwent change here. So we became new Africans. We took the best features of Africa and rearranged it in a different way because it was under attack. That culture was not under attack that way in the Caribbean because it was 98% Blacks on every one of those islands. And there was very few whites, so they couldn't do anything about it. So you had hybridity. On the one side, you had their language, their religion, their stuff, and on the other side was Africa. And since 97% of the people were African, then the ethos of the African from the Caribbean is African. You know what I mean? And that's why you had a Haitian revolution, because they drew deep into the spirit, only people in the world to destroy slavery in the whole wide world. And they're the strongest people we have in the Western Hemisphere. We're second strongest because any people that could break the back of slavery, they got to be strong. And we need to be using our power in this country to support them. I've had a number of shows on Haiti. Recently, one on the current conditions in Haiti. You should check those out. So when we look at what we're faced today, we're faced today with racism, with the US and the Western powers using their economies to continue to impoverish Africans, people in the Caribbean, and people anywhere else in the world they can get their hands on. We're faced with global warming, which by the end of this century, if it's not corrected, this planet will be uninhabitable. And so you need a just society paradigm to save the planet. This isn't just to fix it. Even the way some of the people who are trying to lower the emission of fossil fuels and stuff are trying to do, that's commendable, but you need to have a just system so that you're not thinking of creating something else to mess up the planet. And that's the real key. So we're faced with war. And this country is in the thick of war all the time. There's been very few periods in American history where there wasn't war. We're faced with poverty. The majority of the people on this planet are living on $2 a day. We're faced with inequality, and the biggest inequality is the inequality of power. The fact that the majority of the Earth's population has no power, and 1% of the Earth's population has most of the power, almost all of it. In this country, over 60% of the wealth is controlled by 1% of the population. And you wonder why suicide rates are high in this country. They won't tell you why, because people don't see any hope. And we have the lowest suicide rates in this country of any people. But among 7 to 11-year-olds, our suicide rates are now higher than the white suicide rate. And someone like Hillary Clinton would say, oh, it's because people are lonely. No, it's because of the policies of you and your husband called neoliberalism.
Yes.
Go around the planet and grab everybody's wealth and put it in the hands of a very few people. It's because you deindustrialized the country and took the good paying jobs and dropped them into China. And I'm not blaming China for this. See, it's the people in this country that made that decision and did that. And that broke up Black families. We went from 75% two-parent households from 1865 to 1968 to 29% two-parent households. Dr. Nathan Hare was the first one to bring that out. Father of Black Studies. Good friend of mine. When I became chair of Black Studies at State, he's the first person I hired. And I tried to get him tenured, you know, beautiful brother. So these are systems designed to put everything in the pockets of the very few. Now you got people working on minimum wage, got to work 2 and 3 jobs. You hear me? No hope of retirement. No real medical benefits. You get that, you know, when you get old, when they figure you're going to die, you know, at that point, you know, you're going to get some Medicare, you know? Yeah, they would allow that, but they're not going to allow, unless you fight for it really hard, medical care. And it's the only country in the Western world, of course, this ain't the West, but it's run by people who came from there, that doesn't have health care. You hear me? So why am I saying this? If what we're doing around our past is not about correcting this, what is the point? You hear me? What is the point? Yeah, it makes you feel good to know how great you were, but it should make you feel good to stand up and fight. And I know some of us at our age were saying, no, I'm past that, baby. But then your children, and supporting those who are fighting, and fight in the way you can. So you just had a climate conference finished in Dubai, and led by the United Arab Emirates. And there's a man named Sultan Al Jaber of the United Arab Emirates, who's chief of the oil production in the United Arab Emirates. Now, what does this have to do with global warming? It's a chief cause for destroying the planet. So you're going to put in charge of a conference that is supposed to be reducing fossil fuels and ending the heating up of the planet with some fool whose sole interest is pumping more oil and who issues a statement saying that there's no real proof that fossil fuels cause global warming. And you can see why Biden didn't go, because they agreed to him chairing that. Or Biden just doesn't want to be there so they can hang that on him. So he sent his vice president. So what is this saying? This is kind of like sending Jesse James in to cure bank robberies. This is kind of like sending in Adolf Hitler to stop the extermination of Jews. This is like sending the Ku Klux Klan to protect us. I mean, that's what you got. You hear me? And you can laugh, but it's miserable and it's a shame. And it's a shame because the rich have decided they don't care. They just want as much as they can get.
Yes.
Corporations have a saying. They have a saying. I forget the exact one, you know, the exact, it's an abbreviation, but what it boils down to is, remember, we won't be here. Meaning the damage we're doing now, don't worry about it. You got 100 million, 200, 300 million. Enjoy yourself. Don't worry about it. It's not going to affect you. It's going to affect your children, your grandchildren, but all they care about is money. They don't care about their mama, if you want to know the truth. So what we're seeing then is, with the bombing of the Palestinians, they're talking about they've lost each day, they up it a little bit, 18,000 people have died. Are you kidding? They have destroyed most of the buildings. They bombed them. Most of the people are under the rubble. You actually have a scientific count. It's more than 100, 200,000. And every day they're killing them right and left. And who cares? I have a show that I did called Who Cares About the Poor? It's one of my lowest viewed shows. I knew it would be, even with blacks. If you got yours, do you really care? You know what I mean? When Clinton got rid of welfare, because Poor Black people and poor people didn't have an organization of their own. There was a brother named George Wiley, who had been associate director of National Corps, a good friend of mine. He had organized a welfare rights organization. He died in a boating accident, and that organization fell apart. The poor didn't have their own organization. They eliminated welfare. Less than 1% of the federal budget. But where does all the money go? The war budget. They call it the defense budget. How can you call it a defense budget when you're invading the world? Ain't nobody invading this country. You don't need a budget to defend yourself against an invader. You're the invader. You hear me? Huh? So the thing is, we need a vision for just society coming out of this higher mind frequency that can save the planet, that can put us in a position where people are not living in misery. And that is really the task of us studying our history and knowing our past. So it's this cruel, vicious mindset that has made humanity disposable for the few, that has put us in the position that we're in. So to save the planet, to save humanity, we need a vision of the just society that will guide us on the short-term basis and the long-term basis. This is a real key thing, because generally when whites come up with their vision of just society, like the Marxists, theirs is we'll equally distribute the wealth. Well, that's only going to come after the revolution. When is that going to happen? And when it has happened, like say Russia, there's been a few people running everything there. And while things may have improved a little bit, because there wasn't an equal distribution of power, it didn't change the way it could. But you're going to have to wait until everything's torn down before things get better. A vision of the just society should offer some things to improve your life now and in the future. And I can say that's what my systems do. Ella Baker, that's what she was trying to do. Malcolm X, that's what he was trying to do. King, that's what he was trying to do. King was a revolutionary. And you won't get that from his I Had a Dream speech. And I know Menu Ampin has addressed a number of Woze church meetings. He is the best authority on King. In fact, when he was a graduate student, he sent me his master's thesis on the revolutionary Martin Luther King. That's the one you don't hear about. Obama never talked about that Martin Luther King. So that is what we've got to be looking at. So we need a shift in mindset, a shift in philosophy that can lead us along the lines of justice. So Plato, who started this project of taking the spirit away out of reason so you could use it for control. Francis Bacon, who I discussed last week, who was the father of empirical science. He's the one that set the West on the project of controlling nature. And Freud. Freud didn't just want to take spirit and separate it from reason. Freud wanted to rule spirit out, the intuition out of psychology. That's one reason why you can't heal people when they got mental illnesses. The system makes you sick, and then you're going to use the system on them to heal them. All African systems have spirit combined with whatever medical systems they use. The Yoruba system, the Chinese system, acupuncture, they all have a spirit component. How are you going to heal somebody who's afflicted with a total imbalance? Not just one. It's not just the mental part, it's the whole part. So Africans, people of color, and creative human beings in general know that intuition is a gift from God. That's your higher mind. That's the mind that never tells you wrong. That's the one that looks out for you when nobody else is looking out for you. So the Kemites, Africans, Asians, people of color, and some whites. All human beings have this, but because of the way they've taken spirit out of everything, they've reduced spirit to the realm of superstition. And so all of these civilizations understood reason and spirit. Reason and intuition go together. It's just that one is in charge. You know what I mean? It's like we have humans, we have nature, we have animate and inanimate, all of these things, and they've all got the spirit of God in it. According to quantum physics, it's energy. Oh, they don't know what this is. This is spirit, baby. But guess what? There's a higher order within this. And so all people of color understood that God is within everything that God creates, including the human being. And so the Kemites called this heart-mind. Ib or Hati, heart-mind. This is where God dwells, in many other places, but this is the primary place in which God dwells. The Japanese have the same concept, and they call it Kokoro, K-O-K-O-R-O, K-O-K-O-R-O. What does it mean? Heart, mind. And guess how they define it? They say it's that place inside the heart that doesn't move. Now, that's real heavy. Because if you go to the Dogon, when they talk about Ama, A-M-M-A, God, they define God as the one who stays in the same place and that holds everything protectively. You know, that's God. You hear me? God. So the Japanese had this understanding. And you say, where did they get it from? Well, first of all, if you study the human being, you could probably figure it out. But don't forget, the first people in Japan were Anu, A-I-N-U. These were these little Chua people. The first people that founded Kemet were Anu, A-N-U, the founders of Kemet. The first people in China were Anu, A-I-N-U, the founders of China. So it could have come that way or just through some good common sense. You know, and by the way, current research shows that the heart emits more brain or mental impulses than the brain does.
Well,
Not that one.
well,
In fact, one of my former students who was a nurse gave me a 100-page paper on that. You hear me? What you think of that? See, this is part of what, I don't know if we always get it. You know, when we're dealing with the Kemetic stuff or the Yoruba stuff or the Asante stuff or our own stuff, we often treat it as just ideas. But no, these are investigations that people make. They knew this spirit realm as well as you know going around the corner, you know, or anything that's material. And I don't just take it for granted, I check it out. And you usually can confirm this through parapsychology, which is a field, life after death studies, where people have died and come back, and they confirm almost all this stuff. Christians come back and they say, oh, it's not quite the way they say it was. Oh, Muslims come back, atheists come back. They all have the same story. What the Yorubas say, what the Asante say, what the Kemites say, and some of the other Asian and Native American people say, you know. So the Chinese called heart mind Zen, X-I-N, or Qin. It meant heart mind. And they saw this as the center of cognition. So why am I covering this? Because in dealing with the higher mind, the question is, how do we access it? Where does it come from? And I'm not going to suggest, oh, here, when I'm finished, you know how to access this. You already do to an extent because we're all spirit people. So we all have our own spirit experiences. So, you know, we know how this works. I'm talking about the highest mind. But the point is, I'm not suggesting that in this discussion, oh, here it is, now you know everything. No, I'm just describing where it comes from, how it works, and what good does it do for humanity. this is the real key thing. It's the cure for a lot of illness. And I'm not just talking now about physical or psychological. I'm talking about those that afflict the planet. So the Kemites had a saying. They had many sayings. They said that human beings receive divine guidance from within their hearts. I'm quoting from Medu Neter. Human beings receive divine guidance from within their hearts. A high priest of Amun says of the heart that, quote, it is the heart that steers the tongue. It gives the tongue direction. Think about that. In another passage, a passage from Amen Mopep, he says, quote, listen to this one. A man is warned against steering himself with his tongue because the universal Lord is the pilot of the ship of human life. In other words, it's not chit chat just coming out of your mouth that is what provides guidance. It's what comes from the heart. And it comes from the captain of the ship. That's God. You hear me? And it's inside of all of us. In another passage, it says, this I think is just absolutely beautiful. The heart is the organ through which God guides a man, which means a woman. God guides human or a woman. Quote, the heart is the organ through which God guides a man. Obenga often pointed out, Dr. Theophil Obenga, the foremost authority on dynastic Kemet, he would point out that in Kemet, it's two levels. One is material. In other words, they would depict something in its real form. So the heart, they knew the human anatomy. So they would convey the heart exactly the way it looked. So heart, hati or ib, means literally that. But then they understood that for everything that was matter, there's spirit. And so when they're describing God within the heart, then they're talking about the heart as the seat of real consciousness. See, we'll get this confused. Consciousness, that can mean all the things that we mean now. You know, I wake up, I'm conscious. I say something, I'm conscious. No, yeah, true. It means that, but it means God consciousness, higher consciousness. I mean, that's the key thing, which is the key to the wisdom that carries us through life. And here's the real beautiful one. And you could find this in probably any African system because they have ways of saying the same thing. They said, the heart of a man or woman is his God. The heart of a man or a woman is his or her God. Now that would suggest that maybe this also means that a part of God, which is in each one of us, that it's a part of God that is guiding us. And it could also mean that at certain times, you get the privilege of going upstairs and actually getting a conversation with God, not just a part of God. And there are a few of our people that have been privileged with that. And if you ever get guidance from this level, then that is what you call pure beauty and pure truth. And that's the kind of healing that our planet and our people need right now. So the Shabaka text, in referring to the Ib, Hati, or heart mind, it makes the point that, and you know, the Shabaka text is coming in the latter period of Kemetic civilization, but it's drawing from the ancient past. The Ethiopians and stuff were really going back to the source, to the beginning. And so the Ib or heart mind in the Shabaka text is suggesting that the way our thoughts work is an imitation of the way God's mind works. This is the key point. So when we're talking about the higher mind, it's imitating the process of God. not at the full level of God. None of us have that power, but, you know, trying to follow in that path. So in Dogon thought, in Kemetic thought, Yoruba, Asante, Igbo, any of the African thought systems, the notion of the creation of the cosmos, particularly in Dogon thought, they make this especially clear. It's also clear in Kemetic thought. It occurs through the mind of God. The cosmos is an emanation of God's thoughts. And I believe that's true. How do you explain out of nothing coming everything? How do you explain in quantum physics a state of singularity where there was nothing? This is, to use the Kemite expression, before happening happened. How do you explain that? And astrophysicists say there's a wrinkle in space that is that singularity, that is that point where there was no thing. And then out of this, happening happens. How do you explain that? The same way you explain what happens here. Your creativity comes from your thoughts. As you think, so you are. It's just that God's the big thinker. So this is really why I'm getting into this, because there's some special features of God's mind, and none of us know all of it. I've experienced part of it. I want to share it with you. And you have experienced your own. And I know you want to share that. And that is the heavy part, because when you pipe into this higher level, you're piping into the highest mind, you're getting a part. You'll never get all of it. So in the Dogon system, the clear word, Sodaya, God thinks through symbols, or what they call Adunoso, drawings in the sand. Aduno, universe, so, word, words of the universe. And those words are believed to be powerful. And by the way, you're not going to get this in Kemetic literature, because very often it's been taken out and it's not a living system now, so you won't get it. But when you get into Inner Africa, if you look at the Bambara, the Dogon, the Asante, and others, you'll see why the spoken word is so important. We're so proud that Kemet invented writing. Yes, they were the first. But their writing imitated speech. It was the spoken word that was most important. Why? Because when you go into the living systems, they'll tell you, because when the word is spoken truthfully, it has vibratory force. And you all know what that is. The vibes you pick up when you enter a room.
Yes, yes.
Hip hoppers say, I feel you. You hear me? And if those vibes ain't right, and animals pick those up better than most people, because, particularly white people, but some of us too, because they're into that vibratory force. They bark or meow or whatever, but they're communicating through vibrations. You hear me? And why is that? God is infinite force outside of space and outside of time. God is not man. God is not woman. And these are forces that are coming from God. And so the most powerful writing imitates speech. First, because it's truthful. And secondly, because as Jacob Carruthers, Jake from Chicago, used to say, it's a walking, talking, doing word. That's why the holiness preacher holds power in the Black community. That's sanctified church, because they're drawn from that spirit power of God. That's why when a sister really knows a man and the man vibrates right, she can get it. But if he doesn't, she don't get it. You hear me? And you know how sisters are, you ladies, you know how that is. Sometimes you'll act like you're not getting it when you are getting it and make the brother really perform. But a good sister is going to know the difference between somebody who talks and somebody who walks. And so in Medu Neter, you have the saying, speak truth, do truth. And so any real wise sister is going to pick a brother whose words match their actions. Am I telling the truth?
I'm gonna step in now, Doctor. We've been going for about 50 minutes. There's been people that have put in questions like, are we going to take questions? So why don't you let me play that Aretha?
No. Hold on. Let me wrap this up because I asked you how
All
much
right.
time did I have, so I got a little bit more. Let me wrap this
Oh,
up.
okay. Okay.
Yeah, because if you cut this off here,
Oh,
you've
no.
gone
No, I
way
don't
more.
want to. I don't
And
want
then
to.
after that, they can do that.
All right. All right.
You can do the song and everything else if you want to. So you know the key point is this path to creativity is through God, and it's through the heart mind, and it's through the path of the truth, and that's where the power is. And so in Medu Neter, clarity is provided through a process called Sia, Hu, and Heka. Sia represents exceptional intellectual clarity. Hu, articulate command. Heka, extraordinary power. Now, some of us, when we're saying that creativity follows the path of God, then we think that it just means you think, then that leads to your speech, therefore it leads to action. On one level, it means that. But on the higher level, when they're talking about exceptional intellectual clarity, then we're talking about the clarity that comes from God, the higher clarity, which then, when you're able to pick those vibratory forces up, then it informs your speech and it gives you power, extraordinary power, which Heka means magic in Kemetic thought. So the highest level of thought comes through revelations that few human beings have. And these revelations are the key to the salvation of humanity. And so in African American culture, we have a process for going through this. It's a mastery process. And I'm not going into this here, but it's a process for getting the lower mind to obey the higher mind. But the key point about accessing this higher mind is this: all breakthroughs in science, in history, in the arts, in all fields of culture come from this higher mind. And so I just want to show that if the heart is the seat of God, and this is where the higher mind dwells, as well as, you know, the mind of intuition, then what we should see is how this is manifested in science. And so in the case, or in any area of life, and this is where the great breakthroughs come from. So in science, you have in the area of chemistry what's called the periodic table. The periodic table is the organization of the elements in chemistry. Nobody had been able to put these in their proper order until a man, and by the way, this innovative path is a path that God gave all human beings, not just Africans. So when I'm explaining this, you know, it applies to us because you're going to see us in this too. So there's a man by the name of Mendeleev who had a dream of the periodic table. He said, I saw in a dream a table where all the elements fell into place as required. Awakening, I immediately wrote it down on a piece of paper. Now, when the chemists describe this, they say, oh, he was in the rested state and he came up with this. No, he said, I saw it in a dream. This came from God. The logical mind is good at putting things together, but in parts. It can never get the whole picture of anything that's really complex. So this was the innovation so dire coming to him, you know, through a dream. Or you have a man named Niels Bohr who had the dream of the atom. No one had figured out how this atom worked. And he's considered the father of quantum mechanics. And he said that he had a dream of the atom. And that dream showed him how electrons travel around the nucleus and can jump from one state of energy to the other. It came to him in a dream. In the case of chemistry, again, you had a German chemist, his name was Friedrich August Kekulé. And he was looking for, again, the structure in chemistry, which was the structure of the benzene. And he saw a snake swallowing itself in a dream. And that gave him the breakthrough on the structure of benzene, a great breakthrough in chemistry. Einstein's theory of relativity came to him in a dream. As a child, he saw it first, and then when he was older, he saw it again, riding a sleigh at the speed of light. And from this dream came the theory of relativity. George Washington Carver was the greatest scientist of the 20th century. Why? Because he said he was able to think God's thoughts. How? Through dreams. He was a botanist, but he had more breakthroughs in the area of science, not just botany, than any other scientist on the earth. Almost everyone said he was the greatest scientist ahead of Einstein, except Einstein. Einstein said George Washington Carver was second. Of course he would say that. It wasn't Einstein that was given a blank check by Henry Ford. It was George Washington Carver, and George Washington Carver never filled it out because he said, I'm here to help my people. If I go work for him, my people ain't going to get any credit. Furthermore, he knew he was a racist, but he didn't care about money. But the key point is his innovations in the area of botany came from God, but his gifts were something he was born with. And I want to end this on my own experience with the light. The book Return to the African Mother Principle of Male and Female Equality that Imhotep showed you, this is my greatest achievement, more than any organizing or anything else. Why? Because when I'm asking about the just society, God gives me the formula. No other historian has this formula. And it really reshapes history. But more important, it provides the basis for restoring justice in an unjust world. And what was that? So through a beautiful light, because when I've had this experience, I see a light, I don't hear anything, it's telepathic. And God's words were, the just societies of Africa were those where all the males and females were equally empowered to govern every phase of society. Think about that. That's the best definition you can have for Ma'at on earth. Because society is made up of males and females, where's the injustice going to come in? Well, one has got more power than the other. Certain elites have more power than everybody else. But when you have a society of balance between males and females, then you have something. But when you get a vision from God, just like quantum physics, the law of relativity is proven by experiment. Well, in this case, God was telling me how societies worked for over 100,000 years in the hunter-gatherer stage. And those were Twa. Yet we don't study them in human history. And later, after writing the book, I discovered they founded Kemet. And then I discovered, once I get the vision, I knew this, they had the largest civilization in the world. The whole world was Twa-based. People lived for 100,000 years with no slavery, no oppression. Hunter-gatherer and then agrarian. So in concluding, I'm going to say this, that when you pipe into God's mind, you pipe into a whole mind, a totality of a part, because you're never going to get the whole. And that totality is healing. And so today, when you have families that are broken in Black communities, you have extended family communities that are broken, you need a vision that comes out of your history that can enable you to restore balance. And that's what this is. That's the way of the Lakota Native Americans. That's the way of all people who are piping into God's mind. Hotep.
Right.
Hotep.
Let me
Ashe.
let me just follow up with his message. This was a a request, and you all have heard this song before. Let's listen to one of our great singers.
Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand. I get tired, I'm weak, and I get worn. I wonder, do you know?
All right. You got a friend? All right. So we're going to open it up.
The reason that I wanted you to close on that is Thomas Dorsey had not been successful in his composition until Precious Lord. And that was divinely inspired after the loss of his wife. But Thomas Dorsey is one of the innovators in our culture who brought the spirit back when we were losing it, because that's part of the war we've had, to try and keep our African way. And so he was bringing the blues back into gospel music. And with the loss of his wife, the sadness and everything else, it led to the beauty of this song that was divinely inspired.
All right. I really am touched by this subject, bringing the spirit back into scholarship and philosophy. And I saw a question from Queen Sheila. Queen Sheila, are you there? Would you like to ask Dr. Obatashakus your question? Go ahead.
First, I want to just say thank you so much. My mind is just blown. You were talking about despiritualization, and I couldn't help but think about this push toward artificial intelligence, which I know it's been around a long time, and even though they're calling it artificial intelligence, it's not that it's new, but it's just taking on it's going in a new direction, I think. So I'm just interested in your thoughts about that and how it relates to the despiritualization that you were talking about. Thank you.
Yeah, it's an instrument for control because artificial intelligence operates in different ways on different levels. So it's combining a lot of what you'd call the lower mind of reason, a lot of information compacted into systems, so that if you're going up against, say, somebody who's very smart in an area, it can come to stuff quicker, you know what I mean? And often beat them. And it's also a system for replacing people. It's a part of what the automized system was designed to do. It's also a weapon for war, because you can put out soldiers who will be machines. They won't bleed. and they can go and do all kinds of damage. So it's a part of all of that. And basically, it's a part of a machine mind. As you think, so you are. And so in this despiritualized world, starting with the Greeks, matter means more than anything else. The problem with artificial intelligence is, even though they say it cannot intuit. It cannot do intuition. It cannot draw from the higher mind, which they don't think exists, but at the same time, they have trouble explaining their geniuses who draw all their stuff from their higher mind. Because genius is nothing more than people, and I'm not in this, I'm not putting myself in this, people who are drawing from God's mind. Innovation, it came from God. And it doesn't mean that person, an Einstein, wasn't smart or whatever, didn't make his contribution, but he discovered a law that was already there, invented by God. God gave it to him.
Yes.
So a machine can't get that.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Queen Sheila. Minister Ahmadi, you had a question. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Just a magnificent presentation. I just want to say this before I ask my question, that your book on leadership, I have never read a book on leadership like that. It is so applicable to the kind of work that we want to do in terms of nation building. I just wanted to tell you that. I mean, I never read a book like a leadership book like that. So I want to commend you on that. And my question is, are you still taking in people into your mentorship program? I remember last year you said you were going to be taking in people, if they had projects already going. Whatever happened with that? And, is it still open or what?
Yeah, we're still, we wanted 40 people. It's for the sixfold stages to mental freedom. And be taking people through a process of a deep dive into their identity. But that only works if they're engaged in doing stuff to uplift their community. If they're just coming in to have a dialogue, it's a waste of time. And that's one of the reasons why I'm doing the show, is to reach out to many younger, active people, as well as anybody else, but especially younger people. And we've been able to do that. So we're coming close to where we'll have 40. And then Ustadi, Thabiti, Fanya, and myself we'll be doing this. With 40, we'll break people down into groups of 10 twice a month, and then take them through this transformative process through the work they're doing in the community. So, yeah.
All right. Well, I want to get in on that. So how do you
do is just send me Dr. Oba Tashaka show, say, I'm interested in enrolling sixfold stages of mental freedom, or, something like that.
All right. Thank you.
I have your email address so we can contact you,
All right. Okay. So what's your email then that we send it to?
O, and then my name, Tashaka, TSHAKA, at S is in Sam, B is in Brown, C, global.net. O, Tashaka, at sbcglobal.net.
I say thank you. Appreciate you so much.
By the way, the books on the art of leadership took me 10 years to write. And because by the time I started writing that, I had a computer. So the first draft was on my experience. And that had been 30 years. Now I've got 63. Then the second draft was the experience of Africans in America in organizing and leading. And then the third draft was on the experiences of anyone in the world that had methods that worked. And so that took 10 years to write, and it's been used all over the world by different people in different groups in different situations. And by the way, Higher Mind, I went for a life reading from a spiritualist in 1982 who laid out what he saw as what I do in my life, including the books I would write. He didn't know I was already writing this book. He said, you need to write some books on leadership so that if you leave a community, you have something else to leave them with. And then about 10 years later, I saw him again. I brought all the books I wrote, and I told him, when you predicted that, I was writing that at that time. So that again shows how spirit works, you know?
That's true. All right. Thank you,
Yeah.
Minister Adi, for that question. Uh, Brother Ali, I'm not sure. Are you asking a question? I'm not sure what you mean, what you put in the chat. Can you go
Oh,
ahead?
I was just responding to what was said about AI. A lot of people misunderstand AI. AI cannot think like humans can yet. They would like for it to be that way, but it cannot do that. It only can answer questions that are pre-programmed, or it searches the internet for information, then it brings that information and presents it back to you in an English sentence. And it tricks a lot of people into thinking that it actually can think, but it cannot think.
All right. Thank
So
you. Yeah. Well, you went back on mute. Ali, can you take yourself off? Go ahead.
I just wanted to share that. That's all.
All right. All right. Great. Great. There's a couple of things that Dr. Tashaka had said, and I wanted to show them, and perhaps he could. So this is how we got you guys out. And Sister Thandiwe, she takes such great pictures. So a lot of these pictures are pictures that she put in. And this is what I think. You know, this is my concept of Dr. Tashaka. He's a Leo, he's a warrior, and he's showing us yesterday and tomorrow. And his message, Sodaya, or the innovative light. And these are the concepts that he was talking about. So in his book, Return to the Mother Principle, he has these. So within the Dogon system, you have the Jiriso, the Beniso, the Boloso, and the Sodai. These are 4 degrees of knowledge. And then here he shows, on this other one, he shows that Sodai is the peak system of this knowledge. It's the highest word revealed to initiates. The whole process is the cleansing thoughts, words. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. Thoughts, words, and actions, so that our words and insights will reflect the eternal wisdom of the soul, like the clear word, free of blemishes. So that's where we're trying to get to. And Dr. Tashaka, is there anything that you would like to add on these concepts? Anything else that I, well, there's a lot to it, but is there any?
But two things. One is your point about cleaning yourself up spiritually so that you're free of blemishes. That's an internal process. That is a part of what enables you to access this higher mind. So George Washington Carver was especially gifted because he was such a pure spirit. The Twa, who give birth to humanity, they have the highest mind powers of parapsychology. They're the most inventive people in the world. And by the way, I would say this, in revealing to me the vision of the just society, what God was telling me is to get the priorities straight. Kemet is the greatest achievement in classical African civilization. That is highly structured civilizations with a king, sometimes a woman as pharaoh, a priesthood, medical system, an urban civilization, as well as an agricultural one. So that's the greatest classical civilization. But the greatest civilization when it comes to creativity, I call it the civil civilization. That is where you had the greatest kindness and justice on the planet, and where the major elements of civilization were created, starting with being civil people. And so Kemet, in their creation of pre-dynastic, which is an incorrect term, because you can't really call this pre-dynastic since the dynasties started before the first dynasty. And so what you have in these in this civilization that goes back 10,000 BC, all the elements of Kemetic civilization was created there. And it was created by these little people. And the most just part, and because I didn't explain that when I got this thing of the just society, all the males and females being equally empowered to govern every phase of society, I called this twinlineal, which means your lineage isn't just, you're not descended just from your father, just from your mother, but mother and father, grandmother and grandfather. And if you conceive God to be he, you got to conceive God to be she. God is neither one. But if that's what you conceive, you got to have both. And so that is the my translation of this term, equal empowerment. And it's when you revisit that, restructure that for the modern world, that you can restore justice to this planet. I'm a warrior. I don't think that's going to happen automatically. I don't think you're just going to pray this into being. It's going to be some serious battles. But the question is, what are you fighting for? The other thing is, when you gave the 4 levels of the Dogon system, there are 3 levels in the African-American system that are the same. And so when you go to my book, when I finish it, you'll see how that worked. John Henry Clark was one of the masters that I studied who went through that. He didn't go to no university. His university was University of Masters, you know, and there were others that I studied who were like that. So the African-American system carried this initiatory system, not necessarily Dogon. Very few came from Dogon country, but African mastery systems are all pretty much the same. They carried that into the United States, the Caribbean, South America. And if you got a master among us, they've come through it at the feet of masters.
All right. Thank you for that. We have a hand raised. Sugar D, go ahead.
Thank you so much. This has been just enlightening. I had a question. In the beginning, you were talking to someone about a book that you wrote, and you said something. You said, generation gap, choice between two something. What was after that?
Yeah, this is a book called The Integration Trap, Generation Gap, Caused by Choice Between Two Cultures. Brother Imhotep showed you the book. That was written in 2004. It's the latest book that I wrote. The title is Integration Trap, Generation Gap, Caused by a Choice Between Two Cultures.
Can everybody see that? So here it is. It's like the 4th one down.
Also, I heard you at the end say something. You said, that didn't come from me, that came from God.
Those words, that comes from an experience that I had in class at San Francisco State before I got this vision for the Just Society. I had a student who said, if our culture is so strong, why is it unraveling so fast? And she is living through breakup of families, drugs being dropped in the Black community, violence and everything else. And I gave an answer. I didn't have an answer. And I realized I didn't know. I went back to class, the following class, and apologized. I didn't feel bad because I gave the wrong answer. I made a mistake. I felt bad because I didn't know. And so I'm sitting at my house. I was living in Richmond at that time in the 80s. And James Baldwin, he had died. He was on TV, and he made a comment. He said, since the late 60s, powerful hostile forces have hit the Black community, the likes of which it wasn't prepared for. I couldn't give her the answer because I'd been organizing then since 1960 for over 20, 25 years. I was too close to the forest to see the trees. I didn't have the perspective. So when Baldwin said that, I got half the answer. It clicked, half of it, that there are forces that have hit us that have caused this. So I'm sitting in my study one night. When I see the light, it's at night and things are very quiet, and when I'm humble. And in the case of the first one, the last one on the mother principle, that was after 5 years of retreats of 3 months a year for 5 years, 15 months, I went in the country and looked at myself because I was out of balance with the feminine side of my being. I was good at driving fear into my enemies, running all over them. But the sensitive, I'm a nice person, but that harsh energy and stuff, it was out of balance. And so it took those 15 months to cleanse myself, purify myself. And that's when I got this light. That was the big light. And that was the most beautiful experience of my life. I have never seen anything more beautiful than that. By the way, God is a white light, great white light. People who have been to the highest realm of heaven say so. Fool's Crow, who's the greatest holy man among the Lakota people, has traveled to this region. He was a healer and stayed there for 2 days. That's a long time when you're doing astral projection where your soul travels. Most people, it's milliseconds because heaven's outside of space and outside of time. And to get that much face time with God, that must be a hell of a good spirit. You know what I mean? So I was seeing a part of God, but that's the light, this little light of mine, that light inside of you, your soul, that's a part of that too. God's a great white light. So when what happens, I'm sitting in my study, very humble, don't expect to get an answer. And I ask, what happened? Because things are falling apart. I don't understand it. And when I get these messages, it's telepathy. There's no words. I don't hear any words. The light speaks without speaking. Spirits don't speak, by the way, you know. And so what the light said without talking is a choice between two cultures. And when I put it together, the hostile forces that have hit the Black community, and later I realized God wasn't just giving me an answer for what's gone wrong in the Black community. God was giving me an answer for what's gone on in the African world. And guess what? What's going on in the white world? And so when I put it together, and in the first chapter in the Integration Trap, I explain it. And so the forces that hit Black communities, deindustrialization, taking jobs out, good paying jobs, Blacks were concentrated in the industrial work. 20% of the people doing industrial work were Black. We're only 12% of the economy. So when you lose those good paying jobs, that does more to damage the family than anything else. And so you went from 75% two-parent households between 1865 and 1968 to 29% two-parent households now. And in the book, I give economic correlations. And so in the period 1979 to 1980, 700,000 Black men lost their job. 700,000 Black men left the family. No finance, no romance. It's not the only cause, but it's the primary cause. Drugs hit the extended family community. So you've got some kids not being raised by anybody now. You know what I mean? And then the prison industrial complex, a host of other things. The key point is this. Ustadi, who you all know, many of you know, he's a master organizer, former student of mine. Ustadi would say years after reading this, he'd say, brother, because he's also a psychologist. Ustadi is very good at studying people. He said, it's a choice between two cultures. I had a show on my show, the Dr. Obert Shashaka show, with the sister from IRI FM. She had me out to speak for Garvey's birthday in 2014. I addressed 1 million people from Jamaica. And she had read the book since 2014. And she was saying, what I see in Jamaica is a choice between two cultures. Because I asked her while we were doing the interview, I said, has the Black family been affected by what is called structural adjustment, where they come in and give you loans on condition that they collapse your economy? They destroyed the Jamaican economy. You hear me? And so then she pulls something from the Daily Gleaner, a newspaper, the national newspaper in Jamaica, and it's saying Jamaicans are losing faith in the family. Choice between two cultures. Now, how bad can it get? We've got people now who are more accustomed to being single than being married. And a lot of people who question marriage, but they want to be married, but they're not in a position to. So this is the first time in our people's history where you're seeing some Black folks making choices outside their culture. You hear me? You see the erosion of respect for elders. That's a surface level. But then you've seen the emergence of a group of people who are killers, who call themselves savages. I was documenting this in the 80s, who are mass killers, and everybody in the community knows who they are. And they're killing for a couple of reasons. They were not raised with any love. In slavery, almost everybody got love. There were few who didn't, very few. The extended family community healed you when you were separated from family. But when you got a grandmother and mother or father who's a drug addict, and in some cases frying their kids in frying pans, what do you think's gonna happen? You know what I'm telling you? Huh? This ain't never happened before. And by the way, don't think Whitey's so mighty. He didn't predict this. Drug culture, yes, he knew that was a choice between two cultures. He knew that. He wouldn't call it that, but he saw he's putting an alien culture in. But the rest of that, he didn't think that he was going to create a choice between two cultures because he didn't think you got a culture. And most of us don't either. And that's another reason why we're in trouble. If you ask the average Black youth, do they have a culture? They'd tell you no. There are those who believe they do. And we've got some of our own older people who will say the same thing. Run around the world talking about they took my culture from me. That's your cause for reparation. That's a cause for you saying you're not human. As long as you're alive, you have a culture. So this is the key point. Here's the other thing. What's the main reason that a part of Trump's base comes from Obama voters and Bernie Sanders voters? What's happening there? Because their lives have been collapsed. This same neoliberalism that has taken a good life out of Black communities, done the same to white communities, it's just not as bad. When they took the jobs out of Black communities, they sent them to the suburbs. Now those jobs are largely gone. And so you're seeing people popping pills and going on drugs, and you're seeing life expectancy among whites going down by 4 years in the last 5 or 6 years. That's huge. That's the main reason. And Trump is claiming to be a populist. He's a fake populist. He's claiming he'll stand up against the system that's oppressing them when he's a big part of it. But the point is, some of them know that, some of them don't. But that's the main reason. So you're seeing it's not a choice between two cultures in that it's their culture, right? But it's their culture that's eroding. They've taken the crumbs from them. That's what neoliberalism has done. So this is a global phenomenon. So what I really like about God's gift to me is God gave me two answers. One is the basis for rebuilding just societies. And the other is the correct analysis of what's gone wrong, and then what we need to do to correct it. Because God's mind's a whole mind of a part, meaning they'll give you the whole of a part. So in a choice between two cultures, it's telling you two things. Stepping out of your culture is the problem, caused by powerful forces. But it's telling you drawing from the best of your culture is key to the solution, combined with economics, with politics, with social systems, self-defense systems, global Pan-African systems. It's a whole bowl of wax, but your culture's at the foundation of it.
All right, thank you. And now we have a question. We have one last question, and Brother John Jackson. John, would you like to articulate this, or just want to just say what you have in the chat? Go ahead. You're on mute.
Yeah, I've been reading. Thank you, Dr. Chaka, for all that you said. I do have your book. I just got to read it one day. Generation Gap. Yeah, that book. But anyway, I've been listening to a lot of James Baldwin lately, a lot of his speeches. And because you mentioned his name, I just wonder if you would mind sharing a thought or two about him. Because I'm quite impressed. I mean, the man died a long time ago, but the things he said back in the late 50s and early 60s and late 60s into the 80s resonate with me to this very day. So did you ever meet the man by chance?
No, I never met him, but I've read his stuff and his insight. He's a real best product of our culture. He said that his thinking drew from jazz. And if he says so, it did. But it's very clear it also drew from the Black church.
Yeah.
Because if you look at many of his writings, they're biblical in terms of their names and stuff. So he was a free thinker. He was not somebody imprisoned by any ideological system. He's the only person that I saw that beat Malcolm in a debate.
I saw that.
The reason he beat him is Malcolm was coming from the Nation of Islam line. He was coming from the line of the way he saw things. And Malcolm did too, but in this particular case, he got the better of him because he was doing it more freestyle. You know what I mean? Malcolm did too, but you know, so what I thought of him is that he was a person who was a creative artist, and out of slavery, we did a couple of things. We created a new African culture based on fundamental African principles with new additions. The Integration Trap, I got about 88 pages that look at what this culture is, you know? And there's a book called Exchanging Country Marks by Michael Gomez that you should read. It's one of the best expositions on African-American culture. See, we do ourselves a disservice if we only study Africa. We're the Africans that are living the reality today, along with Africans in every other part of the world. So we need to know our culture. Our culture is the popular culture of the world, new African culture. And it's the classical jazz culture of the world. So Baldwin is coming out of that as a novelist. And in this country, among Blacks, we're inspired by musical forms. So the highest level of thought in our community is inspired by either jazz, blues, gospel blues, rhythm and blues, funk, or hip hop. And hip hop's produced some heavy thinkers, by the way. I mean, for those that don't think they have, yes, they have. And some of that is guiding some of the stuff they did with Black Lives Matter, for example. Baldwin is piping into the musical genre, I think, of both jazz, because when you think in jazz, Malcolm X was a jazz thinker. King was a gospel blues thinker. The jazz thinkers think in complexities. The gospel blues thinkers think in it from an emotional and spirit-based, and they've also got complexity, but it's the jazz thinkers most complex. Now with Baldwin, you bring both together, you know? So that's real heavy. So he gives you the beauty, because the novel form is one of the most beautiful expressions that you can have in writing. Ivan Van Sertima's book, They Came Before Columbus, when I was driving him to Woze in the 80s, because when you spoke at state, you had to speak in the community. And so it was required that they go, in this case, to Woze. I'm asking him, what's the secret of the beauty of They Came Before Columbus? He said, I wrote it like a novel. I'm trying to write the book that I'm finishing now like that, because it's artistry in that. Even Barack Obama, that was a part of his appeal. He knew how to tell a story. You know what I mean? So what I think of Baldwin is, I think that he was a complex thinker who brought a lot of feeling and compassion about the condition of Black people and the condition of this country, and called a spade, you know? So, you know, he's a brilliant man. He was seeing things that it was hard for some of us who thought we were political to see. And Malcolm would make fun of him at times, but Malcolm respected that mind, you know.
All right, we have one more question here. Brother Damani asked this question. Brother Damani, do you want to ask it yourself, or just want to leave it like it is in the chat?
Oh yeah, you can just leave it like it is in the chat.
Go ahead. You're off. Go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, my question, Brother Strong. Can the Aryan, you started off, you was talking about the, well, let me cut on my, earlier tonight you were talking about the Aryan and the Aryan, you know, breaking down the word Aryan and Aryanness. I know Dr. King said told James Baldwin we're gonna have to be firemen because we're integrated into a burning house. So now we got to be firemen. And so it seems like we're spending a lot of energy trying to change the Aryan mindset to basically civilize the white people. So my question is, can the Aryan mindset be changed? You say Lord Master Aryan, he just think of himself as Lord Master. So
I hope that you didn't interpret my comments as that. I was describing how they thought. That question spins on something else that I know, and I'm not giving an answer to because that's going to be my 9th book. And the question is, were they always like that? Huh? And that's a whole nother question. You know what I mean? So there's a song that says, everything must change, nothing remains the same. The young become the old. Mysteries, they do unfold. That's my favorite non-spiritual song, not that it isn't spiritual. So everything but a fool changes. Now, will they change? Well, that remains to be seen. I am not into saving white people, but I am into creating just societies. And I've led movements, and this is what a lot of Black people don't get. The movements that I led, for example, and that King and others have led, they produce systemic change. What does that mean? It means it produced change for Blacks first, but it also changed the conditions of some other people, mainly brown, red, and yellow. Now, some people will say, oh, why'd you do that? They ain't gonna do anything for us. Have you ever been involved in a struggle for change? It's kind of like damming up water. Can you just dam it up for a certain group of people and that's it? You're in a system where if you change the system, it's going to affect the conditions of everybody. And of course, being the world's first people, we have that as an instinct anyway. So what I'd say is, I don't know if they're going to change or not, but if they got any sense, they may. But whether they do or not is not going to matter because they're going to be a minority when it comes to people. Now, when it comes to the people that run things, it's always been a minority that ran things. But in the next 20 to 30 years, whites are going to be a minority. You hear me? And so the question is, what do we do with our culture, both ancient and current, in terms of how we reconstruct our societies? What do we do? That's the question. And here's the key point. Not only is our culture the popular culture of the world and of the United States, by the way, but it is our culture that contains the radical thought that transforms society, our culture. I'll just give you one example. I had the great artist for the Black Panther Party, Minister of Culture, Emory Douglas, on a couple of my shows, really beautiful brother. And he said something I didn't know. This shows you the power of our culture. And this is the last group I would think this would be true, but I wasn't surprised, but I didn't know. The Black Panther Party provided the model that inspired the American Indian movement. They formed on our culture. And the reason why I said that's kind of surprising because they got a great culture, great spirit culture. Exterminated to 90%, but they're coming back. Now, if we could influence Native Americans, we could influence just about anybody. And guess what? In the 60s, we influenced a whole bunch of white youth, radicalized them. You hear me? Why? Because of the beauty of our culture and its soul and heart, it's based on freedom. And it frees them up. And wherever a culture goes in the world, it frees people up, starting with us. Because it's at base spirit, but it's based on freedom and it's based on creativity. The African in America is the most creative African or human on the planet. And most of us don't even know it. And creativity is the name of the game. That is the thing that's closest to God, along with good character, creativity. God's a creator. Doesn't mean we're God's big name walking around with no egos. It just means that of all the qualities we have, that is the most important one. And that's the one that will get you over when you ain't got nothing else. Because if you got creativity, and that's what has enabled us to survive in this country, creativity, buddy. You hear me? Huh?
Yes,
Making
sir.
something, of course, we say making something out of nothing, but we were actually taking the greatness of Africa that we brought here and expanding on it. But it looked like we had nothing. But what we had inside of ourselves was the greatest possession that you could have. And by the way, the most dignified Africans, as Zora Neale Hurston said, the greatest Africans were the closest to slavery. The enslaved Africans were the greatest Africans because they were the most African. And they came out of slavery with their humanity in check. Something that the Zionists can't say, and a lot of Jews in Israel can't say. The overwhelming majority of Jews in Israel don't care 2 cents about the Palestinians. They want a short peace so they can get all their prisoners back and then just go and bomb the rest of them to the dust. They learn very little. I know some have, because you've seen Jews here who are taking a stand against what Israel is doing and in other parts of the world. But too many of them didn't learn anything from the genocide carried out by the Germans against them. We kept our humanity intact. And see, a lot of us will say, oh, we should be just like them, meaning eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. Yeah, I believe in that. Eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. I believe in that. But I do not believe hate for hate. You know, I do not believe in becoming dehumanized in the process. Imagine coming out of one of the most horrible experiences any people could come through and come out stronger, come out more creative, come out renewed. Imagine, look at all those inventions that Black people invented right after slavery. You hear me? Huh? George Washington Carver, a former enslaved African who had more African inside of himself than even he could realize. You hear me? George Washington Carver said he liked himself and only wanted to be himself and despised any Black person that didn't love themselves. You hear me? And who said he had this is the essence of the book I'm writing right now. George Washington Carver lived according to this pedagogy, teaching method. He said, you can't teach anybody anything. All you can do is bring out what is within them. That's what he was doing. And then he created a paint called Egyptian blue. Huh? He was a walking, talking priest, as in Kemet, a priest healer. You hear me?
Yes.
So-called ex-slave, one of the baddest people you ever laid your eyes on. God loved him so much that God could never give him enough. He was always getting more. Him. But we got a lot of people like that.
Dr. Tashaka, I was going to end, but we have 2 more people that have questions. So Brother John Jackson has a question, and Brother Ali. Go ahead. Go ahead, John.
I mean, I gotta be careful.
Yes, please.
Because I have, as 32 years of being a Christian, I'm about to turn 70 next month. I kind of had an awakening at 65, right? So I'm real new to this Wosei thinking, African mindset, Pan-Africanism, all that, you know. But what my question is, one of the biggest challenges I've had since coming out of Christianity is my understanding of God. And you mentioned so many words that in reference to God are seeing God, hearing God, knowing the mind of God. And I got to admit that that confuses me. And so I'm wondering if you just have some advice that could help to reconcile, you know, this it's two minds I have I'm wrestling with, the Christian mind and the so-called woke mind, and bringing that stuff into clarity, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. First thing to remember is this. The enslaved African, I gave the data on this when I was speaking at WOZE in 1859. Out of 8.1 or 2 million Africans, only 468,000 were Christian. So that means during the whole period of enslavement, most enslaved Africans were not Christians. And what you call Black Christianity was a decision, because we're 97% people. When we make decisions, we usually make them as a group, and it's not all of us coming together in a convention. That's just how it rumbles. And so the overwhelming majority of Blacks after enslavement decided to put their culture under the rubric of Christianity. But what was that? That was voodoo. And that's what W.B. Du Bois said. He said, these Blacks ain't practicing Christianity, it's voodoo. That's what the people who were meeting to try and set up a miseducation plan for us said the same thing. You know what I mean? And the first preachers in the Black church were diviners. And I have the data on this. Du Bois intuited this. I have the proof. You know what I mean? So the first thing to understand is there is a difference between the Black church and the white church. That's the first thing. They're not the same. And the fundamental difference is the role that spirit plays in those two churches. Now, over time, these churches did not remain as voodooistic as they were in the beginning, but they still retained a heavy part of that. And so when you have the Azusa Street revival in LA that gives birth to the Sanctified Church, the founder of that is running through the streets with a bucket over his head. That's the hush harbor. That's where you would put your head under a bucket during slavery to draw down the spirit. And so at every point when our people have had crisis, we always go back to these first principles. So that's why I had Precious Lord at the end of this presentation, because what the father of gospel blues, Thomas Dorsey, was doing was bringing the hush harbor back into Black music, bringing the spirit back. And so that's James Cleveland. And that's the other great singers who save us from this dead, singing, that straight line notes, singing like white people, the Fisk Jubilee singers, who are great singers, but it's operatic stuff. So the first thing I'd say is that the gift of Africans, when they formed their own spirit system, particularly those coming out of slavery, is that spirit is the fundamental thing. You know what I mean? The problem that you have with Christianity, the more you get into the theology, the more problems you got. Because particularly that stuff that doesn't accord with the truth, a jealous God, or the idea that God is separate from what God creates. Only Judaism, Christianity, and Islam have that idea. All other spirit systems, God is inherent in what God creates. So part of having the problem of believing or understanding that somebody could think God's thoughts. Well, that's what George Washington Carver said. George Washington Carver said when he went into a laboratory to create, he was doing creative science by himself, because he had to draw God's thoughts down. When he was talking to a leaf, a plant, an animal, because everything God created is intelligent, and they all have ways of communication. By the way, what George Washington Carver was doing, I was in Ghana in the 80s, and I went to a museum. I was coming out, and I ran into a brother, and it was intuitive. I started talking about George Washington Carver. And the guy said, oh, there's going to be a lecture at the university tonight in Ghana. It was in Accra. And so I went to the university. The lecture was on the botanists who communicate with the spirit of plants and those who just know the categories of plants. Those are Western trained, because the Africans know both. So this is a common thing in Africa, among Native Americans in South America, all these places communicating with the forces of God is just the way it is. Because if you are in harmony with your spirit, you'll pick up those vibes, you know? So part of the reason we got problems in believing, well, somebody can communicate with God is we've been given an image of God. It's a man. It's a great man. And then if we get Afrocentric, he's a black man. You know what I mean? But it's a man. So, and think about this. How could God be a man? God is all the forces of everything and much more. How could you put that in a human being? That ain't even possible. Makes no sense, you know? So when Africans say, the Bambara say, their description of God is infinite force outside of space and outside of time. That's also the same definition as quantum physics, astrophysics. In fact, it is describing singularity, the period before happening happened. Huh? So Africans who are into astrophysics, they have no problem with before time and time. They have no problem. But European astrophysicists can only deal with time. They got real problem with before happening happened. But Africans know they come from the same place. God, who is infinite force outside of space and outside of time. That's also heaven. That's out of space and outside of time. But it's also before happening happened. But it is also describing the God who made happening happen. So what makes more sense? We now know quantum physics and astrophysics has disproved the notion that matter is just matter. All the higher sciences prove that matter is energy. And then we know it's spirit. As Obenga said, Western physics has reached a dead end because they don't know what that energy is that they're dealing with. And so they'll call it wave and particle theory. Now, I was talking to, and it's a brother I'll be working with a lot. I've done 2 shows with him, Julius Garvey, Marcus Garvey's youngest son, who's a retired surgeon and a spiritualist. He makes this point about quantum physics. The continuous reality in quantum physics isn't just waves and particles. He recognizes that. He said the continuous reality is consciousness. And if you think of this notion that God's consciousness created all of this, this makes a whole lot of sense. And then if you have any understanding of spirit, you know it's intelligent. And so it's higher consciousness. Every animate or inanimate being has something going, and in its area, it's smarter than we are. You know what I mean? I mean, whatever it is, because they're set up for that. So, yeah, so what I'd say is the problem with dealing with this is that you've got truth in Christianity, and then you've got stuff that's made up. And you've always got to ask yourself, is this true? And if it isn't, discard it. And it doesn't mean that everything in African systems are true either. You got to check it out. Is it true? It makes sense. You know what I mean? But in the end, like I say, I had a conversation with God. Einstein said that his theory of relativity came from a dream, and Einstein had a real sense of the divine origin of it. Most scientists who have this don't have that understanding. The proof of the pie is in the pudding. So whether you believe or not that I piped into God's mind, here's the proof. The proof is when God gave me the vision of the just society, all the males and females are equally empowered to govern every phase of society. That's the Twa. No other historian has figured that out because I couldn't figure it out. It came from God. And so it's telling you how this society operated. People look at them, the anthropologists, and say, oh, they're helter-skelter. Some of them say they don't believe in God. They don't have respect for their elders. Jive. You hear me? They had the most plentiful, just societies and the most inventive on the planet. But then it creates a whole new school of history because you've got to go back to foundation. You won't understand Kemet unless you understand the Twa, because that is the ancient Kemites. The Anu, A-N-U. That's a picture on the integration trap, these little people. By the way, it was the ANU example on the integration trap book that was what Obenga and Sheikh Anta Diop used in their argument at UNESCO to prove that the pharaohs of Kemet were Black. Huh? They didn't care they were Anu. They just Black. Then that's right, because that was their argument. But I do, because it just so happens they're the founders of civilization, true civilization. And they've been put in the back room of anthropology, which is fit or used for Blacks and people of color. And only Laplanders among whites are included in that field.
Okay. Thank you, Brother John, for that question. And this is absolutely the last question. And this is coming from Brother Ali. Go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to say, you know, I'm from New York. I grew up in New York, and when I was a young boy, I remember people saying that they were not Black. Black people saying that they were not Black, saying, you know, they're Indian. And I always thought that they were joking, and I always thought that, you know, why are they saying that? They must not like themselves. That's the first time I've had any exposure to the thought of self-hate. And now, as an adult, I'm starting to see these pockets of movements starting to spring up with young people saying the same thing. They're saying that they're Indian. And I realized that, you know, Black people traveled around the world before anybody else has. But, you know, I know also that Indian is a misnomer, because Christopher Columbus thought he was in India when he arrived here. So he called the people Indians. And so, you know, now you have these pockets of young people saying these things, and they're trying to separate themselves from Pan-Africanists. And I just wanted to know what your thoughts were on that.
I would say that there's a real awakening going on among young Black people. That's the first thing I would say. And the attack that you're seeing from the right wing on woke, it's originating out of the consciousness arising out of a lot of young Black people on the one hand. On the other hand, the thing you were just, and there is the other side, because the anti-Pan-Africanism thing, that is not coming from Black youth. That's coming from a group of Blacks who've been financed by the right wing, and they're anti-immigration, and they're particularly anti-Blacks coming into this country. They're saying that reparations should only be given to Blacks who were born here. Well, all those Blacks came from where? They came from Africa, they came from the Caribbean, or wherever. And so there's a group of Blacks, young Blacks, who are being programmed, and a part of that is to try and take apart the Pan-African connection. They don't take apart the Pan-European connection. And in fact, this same group, ADOS by name, this ADOS group actually put out a DVD saying the F word on Doc Ben. They actually put a whole DVD on that. You think that came from Black youth? No. This came from right-wing Blacks who are very good at propaganda. And they just dismantled the move towards reparations in California by inserting what they call lineage-based reparations into it. They actually had a vote coming out of the legislature where they were going to probably get a vote for reparations. So it was a good reparations bill. But these crooked suckers come in with this lineage-based reparations, meaning if you can't prove your lineage back to the plantation, you're not entitled to reparations. Well, think about this. How many average Black people can prove what plantation they came from? You hear me? And on my show, I got one person who was coming from this group. He wrote in later. He didn't come in on the live chat. saying that in the Constitution, I've been told it prohibits race-based reparations. The Constitution doesn't say nothing about reparations. What are you talking about? I mean, but they've been told that by the people who are pushing that. And what this group is doing is creating a new identity for a sector of Black youth, saying that you were born in America and you have no antecedents anywhere else. That didn't come from no Black thought. And by the way, Steve Bannon supports this. That's Trump's brain trust.
Well, that's all you need. That's all you need to say. Just on that. Thank you, Brother Ali, for that question. I just want to close now. This has been a great learning experience and things that were written in the chat. And I'm always impressed every time I see Dr. Tashaka. I was talking to him the other day, and he told me how much respect he had for this man, and that he has this picture in his house. And what's happening this day? This is the day that Minister Makalisi's mom, we were celebrating her life. This was her homegoing celebration.
Oh, wow.
And that's Dr. Tashaka with Minister Makalisi. And then, whoops. And then here's his wife, Pamela. They came to express their condolences to Minister Makalisi. And then I did a photo bomb and I got into the picture with them. So
By the way, the picture on the left with my wife is in my study. It's right here. And the picture with Minister Makalisi and you is in my bedroom. You know what I mean? And my wife said, "Oh, that's an iconic picture." I said, "Yeah, two brothers I really love." You know what I mean? And Makalisi, you're one beautiful brother, man. And Woze owes you a lot. And Imhotep, you're doing a good job of following in his footsteps.
Thank you, Dr. Tashaka. I want to just say tomorrow we're having members class, and Minister Makalisi is going to be providing the inspiration and information for the new members class. I got called out. I'm doing a Kwanzaa talk at Grant High School tomorrow, and Minister Makalisi is able to step in and come forward. So if you want to come and ask him any question, no, I'm just kidding. It should be Wose related, but go ahead, Minister. Go ahead.
Well, I just want to say thanks for Brother Obadeshaka for your presentation, for the information you're presenting, and it's just got me thinking and feeling that I'm on a path for growth, and just thank you. And I have things I'll be focusing on, reflecting on, notes that I took. A very informative, very impressive and invigorating spirit coming from you. Thank you so much.
I feel the same way about you. By the way, the picture you have in the back there, the sister and brother holding hand. Oh, was that Ali? Is that the name of the artist that did that artwork right there?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. I have the same one. Now slightly different, but basically the same. You know what I mean? That was a beautiful brother.
Yes, indeed.
Thank
Keep
you.
up the good work, brother.
Thank you.
Yes, and Baba Tashaka, this is Sister Ngina. It's been a long time since I've heard you, but from Sunday, I truly, truly enjoyed you. It's been really wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.
And my wife really appreciates you.
And I love her too. I wish I was with her and right now.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to close out with one of our advertisements, and it's based upon just my discussion with Dr. Tashaka. This little light of mine.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This little light of mine, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, this little light, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. This little light of mine, little light, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This little light of mine, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, this little light, I'm gonna let it shine.
All right.
Wow.
Thank you. Thank you again, sisters and brothers, for coming. Dr. Tashaka, thank you for nicing up the place and keeping our consciousness elevated. And as Earth, Wind, and Fire, a group that I grew up on, one of their first songs, and one of the first songs that Jeruba sang when he came to Wose was "Keep Your Head to the Sky." All right. Guidance and protection, everyone. Looking forward to seeing some of you tomorrow at the new members class, new members training. We'll see you next time. Take care, life, prosperity, and health. Live up.
Blessings to all.
Bye.
Blessings.
Presentation.
That was
Great,
wonderful.
great,
Thank you, Dr. Tashaka.
That was
Thank you.
awesome.
Thank you,
Awesome.
thank you, thank you.
Yes, please come again. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, Dr. Tashaka. See you.
Uncle Johnson.
Uncle Jobson.
Right on.
Wow.